Alvin C. York was never born to be a symbol of war. He was born to the quiet hills of Tennessee, to a life of hard labor, simple faith, and a heart that feared God more than it feared death. And when World War II erupted and the world once again drowned in fire, blood, and screaming sirens, York stood not as a young soldier rushing toward gunfire, but as an aging man carrying memories so heavy they bent his soul, because he already knew the terrible truth the world was about to relearn: that war does not end when the shooting stops, that victory does not erase faces, and that bravery leaves scars deeper than bullets ever could. During World War II, America did not ask Alvin York to fight again because his body was old and tired, but it asked him for something far harder. It asked him to remember, to speak, to relive his pain so that others might find strength. And every time he stood before crowds or young soldiers, he felt the weight of ghosts standing beside him. Men he had seen fall, men whose names history forgot but whose faces never left his mind. As trains carried fresh-faced boys toward distant fronts in Europe and the Pacific, York watched them with eyes full of sorrow, knowing that beneath their smiles lay futures about to be shattered. And every cheer from the crowd sounded to him like a farewell prayer, because he understood that courage does not protect a man from fear and faith does not shield him from loss. York had once wrestled with the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," and that struggle never ended, not even decades later, because World War II reopened wounds he had spent his life trying to heal, reminding him that humanity had once again chosen destruction over understanding, violence over wisdom. Yet despite the pain, he did not turn away. He traveled across the nation, raising war bonds, visiting training camps, speaking to soldiers not as a legend, but as a man who had walked through hell and survived carrying its ashes in his heart, telling them not that war was glorious, but that duty sometimes demands unbearable sacrifice, and that if they must fight, they must hold on to their humanity with everything they had. Many saw him as a hero, but York never saw himself that way. He saw himself as a warning, a living reminder of what war costs long after parades end, because he knew medals do not stop nightmares. Applause does not silence screams remembered in the dark, and honor does not fill the empty space left by fallen brothers. During World War II, he also fought a quieter battle, one for education and opportunity, believing with all his soul that ignorance breeds hatred and that a nation strong in knowledge might one day break the endless cycle of war, pushing for schools and support for rural youth so that future generations might have choices beyond rifles and trenches. As cities burned overseas and headlines screamed of battles won and lost, York's heart broke in silence because every victory meant more graves and every defeat meant more suffering. And he carried that truth like a cross, refusing to glorify death even when the world demanded heroes. He spoke with humility, with trembling honesty, telling young men that fear is not weakness, that faith will be tested beyond its limits, and that surviving war does not mean escaping it. Because war follows a man home, sits beside him at night, and whispers memories he can never fully escape. By the time World War II reached its darkest days, Alvin York had become more than a man. He was a conscience America could not ignore, a voice shaped by regret, faith, and responsibility, reminding a nation intoxicated by victory that every war leaves behind widows, broken families, and souls forever changed. He knew that history often celebrates battles, but forgets the cost paid in silence, and he refused to let that silence erase the truth. Even when speaking, it reopened his own wounds. York's role in World War II was not written in enemy casualties or captured land, but in the hearts he steadied, the doubts he acknowledged, and the tears he held back as he urged others to stand firm without losing compassion. He carried the unbearable knowledge that humanity learns slowly, if at all, and yet he chose hope over bitterness, believing that even in a world at war, goodness must survive in the choices men make when no one is watching. In his later years, as the war dragged on and the toll grew heavier, York's faith deepened, not because war made sense, but because without faith, the pain would have been impossible to endure. And he prayed not for victory alone, but for mercy, for soldiers on all sides, for families waiting at home, and for a future where young men would no longer be asked to prove their worth through violence. In the end, Alvin C. York's World War II legacy is one of quiet suffering and unshakable resolve, a testament to a man who once answered the call of duty and spent the rest of his life paying its price, teaching the world that